what is the effect of pollution? If Your Excellency were to take a walk today in the streets and a vehicle that emitted carbon passed next to you, you'll be choking. What is the effect of an oil spillage? It equally interferes with the oxygen depth in the waters. The turtles breathe that very oxygen. It is a causal effect, and it is linked thereto. Yes, they referred us to paragraph 13, but Your Excellency, what they failed to also consider, paragraph 8 read in paragraph 13 will show this court that it was only barely after 22 days when the process of extraction started, the turtles were found at our shores. Your Excellencies, they've equally stated and read, they're not verbal, but they did fail to one thing. Paragraph 16 speaks. Your Excellencies, the bailiff tells me that I'm out of time. I will only require just but a few minutes to make my conclusion.
I'll give you 1 minute.
Thank you, Your Excellencies, most obliged. Your Excellencies, paragraph 16. The parties were advised to conduct a further investigation. And in that very paragraph, if I may read verbatim, and I'll only pick that very part, which investigated and advised the parties on the likelihood of further significant transboundary harm. Was there harm caused? There was. Your Excellencies, what are we saying? We cannot quantify the cause. We cannot quantify the cost. But then we'll put a figure. Because in any case, we cannot go back to where we were. The environment has been affected. Your Excellencies will be asking this court to find that it has jurisdiction, to find that there was no due diligence conducted, and to find that indeed the respondent state is liable to pay. And we will be asking this court on a basic principle, sum. If I'm to quote Your Excellencies, in the Kenyan position, they say that a barrel of oil is equal to 4 barrels of water. That is as per the project that is going on in Turkana. If I'm to quantify a barrel of oil, Your Excellencies, I'm not an expert in oil, but then it is in the sums of it. And the respondent state, since they want to flex the milestones into that other sphere, will be saying that a figure of $1 million will be but sufficient to help us cure the menace at the sea. Your Excellencies, we implore this court that we have to save a generation, the generation today and the generation not yet seen. And as per the summit at the South African, Your Excellency, in Joburg, the question that was how far can we exploit? How far can we do it? We have to consider today's generation and that of the future. Your Excellencies, find that you have jurisdiction and do dismiss the objection that has been raised by the respondent. I seek to cede the ground.
Thank you very much indeed. That brings us to the very end of this debate. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, which one of these you want to be? The judge's seat or the lawyer's seat? At this point in time, we have a round of applause for this. By shoving the moot court competition that I had announced earlier, 2 teams emerged to be outstanding. Those were Kampala International University and the Kenya School of Law. As I shed a tear for Strathmore and I punch for Kampala and Kenya School of Law. But really, there were no losers. You've seen the quality of the arguments here. So you can imagine where they came from and the people they're competing against. And I was asked to clarify why the judges are being referred to as Your Excellency. This was simulation before the International Court of Justice. That's what we call them there. And if you noticed, we also had gender balance across both teams. That was very deliberate. Asante sana. We challenged the teams to think about balancing in terms of gender. And at this point in time, really, I'd like to call upon the Dean of the Strathmore Law School, Dr. Louis Franceschi.
You know, I'm in this room and I feel still like student because I have my teacher and supervisor, Justice J.B. Ojuan, sitting here. And I remember something interesting that happened many years ago when I went into his office in Parklands and I did not know what to write about, and he did not say much, but he gave me a dissertation from an LLB student, a girl, told me, read this, nothing else. And I went, I don't know if you remember, Prof, but I went and I read that dissertation and it became somehow very clear to me what I wanted to write about. And this is the way he did it 20 years ago, and this is the way somehow we try to do things here at Strathmore. We have not pushed any of our students, we have not pushed any of the visiting students to do this, but we simply gave you this mood competition that Extractives Baraza, the Strathmore Extractive Industry Center, SAIC, Extractive Industry Center have put together, the Strathmore Law School, and gave that mood to students. And students went and prepared. Many of you went and prepared your arguments, your presentation, etc. And that has given you a new horizon, opened incredible doors to discover, hey, there are serious problems and challenges with extractive industries in Africa, and we always have to call the expert from outside to come and resolve them for us. And of course, and that comes at a fee. So shouldn't we try to look at the problems and try to see where we can get advice? We will, but we are resolving our own problems. You know, I shouldn't say this here because I'm being recorded and it's politically incorrect, but the remarks President Trump mentioned a few days ago or a week ago will trigger an incredible forest fire, you see, in the whole world with what has he said. But you see, I don't excuse him and I don't justify that, but certainly, is he saying what many times we think but we don't dare to say? Is he telling us what many people think but maybe, I don't know, international organizations usually call less developed countries or least developed countries? Because in the end comes practically to the same thing, and it shouldn't be. So I think more than we can criticize him and keep him making quiet because it's an insulting remark if he really said it, but we have to reflect and think, hey, how can I change this? How can we be those agents of change who will really take our own problems into our hands and resolve them? And I think that is a great challenge. So in a way, it's what a good teacher did with me 20 years ago, and it's what this mood competition, spearheaded by Melba and her team, has tried to do today. And I hope the mood will not die with the prize giving, but the interest that has been triggered in you will come to a very good conclusion. I was talking to somebody at the entrance, and with this I will finish, and I was mentioning, look, I was taken to visit the tunnel being dug through Gong Hills for the SGR to reach Naivasha and subsequently Kigali. And it struck me the similarity between the SGR being built in 2018 and the British locomotive or rail that was built at the end of the 19th century. Because there is a huge similarity. I think this railway is just passing through Kenya because there is a much more interesting deposit of minerals, etc., on the other side, beyond Kigali, in Congo, and could be a way of reaching Congo, and hey, let's exploit this Of course, it brings us development and it's a very good thing. But you say, well, hey, wait a minute, are we aware of all the aspects of this exploration, exploitation, what is happening? I mean, how things are developing around us? Or are we still like our elder Maasai brothers, for example, were when the railway was passing through them in the 19th century and they did not know what this serpent is all about? Well, I think it's a call for us to be more involved, to be more aware, and to really see the responsibility education gives us in our development and the needs of our countries and all the countries in East Africa. Well, I have spoken for too long. I'm only in page 45. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marcela, for being here. Very supporting, and the Attorney General who sent you, we thank him for that. And Justice Ojuang, we don't take for granted that a Supreme Court judge should come here to judge students. And we thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dean. And in all honesty, Justice Ojuang, we just miss seeing your face. We've been seeing it so much that we had to remind people. Ladies and gentlemen, we now want to go into the prize giving ceremony. So could I kindly ask the following persons to come so that they can be able to give the hands photograph moment. Please, this is when you tweet them, surely. Can we give them their moment in the sun? Our hashtag is KE Annual Baraza. KE Annual Baraza, please. They worked very hard on their memorials. They did a fantastic job. And of course, photo op. Thank you so much. Then, when the orals began in the last 2 days, out of the 12 schools, we identified 2 students who have amazing oratory skills. The ones who even convinced the lawyers, the non-lawyers in this room to pay attention to what they were saying. One is, so we're going to give the best female oralist, is Anne Njoroge from Kenyatta University Law School. So KU did make it to the finals, but she did an outstanding job. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't get better interns than these. The Baraza connects. She's come here twice. Can somebody just tell her, I need to talk to you to come to me to give her a position or something? That is why we have the Baraza. Take note. Her name is Anne Njoroge from Kenyatta University Law School. The best male oralist is Kevin Kokobe. Thank you, Kevin. Kevin is from Kenya School of Law, Kokebe. Kevin Kokebe. And most of us saw him this morning. Are we in agreement? He managed to convince you about what big terms were those? But he did an outstanding job. Thank you so much. And now we want to thank the runners-up, the teams. Now we're getting into the teams. And the runners-up, for this, they did a good job. Remember, we were 2 universities and competed against each other. And the results are in, ladies and gentlemen. Can we have Chitindi Marvelous and Swaleh Wegom Hemed from Kampala International University? Thank you so much for your contributions. And yes, it looks like the applicants did prove their case. Asanteni sana. And that means the winners should be preparing. That, you know how when every lawyer that stood up was doing like this, the suit. Please, can we see that motion again? Some photographs, please, of the runners-up. Fantastic job. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, to announce the winners of the first Extractives Baraza Moot Court competition we have Eva Maria Anyango and Kokebe Kevin from the Kenya School of Law. Just imagine the confetti falling. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you so much. Makofi tafadhali. Maricela, if you can hold on to that trophy together with Justice Ojwang. Hey, you know this is a moment to capture for your legal profession. This one you put it on your CV. The photograph needs to appear. These days CVs are digital, ladies and gentlemen. The winners from the Kenya School of Law who have done a tremendous job. And as they're taking their photographs, we'd like to acknowledge our platinum sponsor, UK Aid, that enabled all this to happen. We'd like to acknowledge our silver sponsors, Oraro Law Firm and Natural Justice and Base Titanium. And we'd like to acknowledge our bronze sponsors, East Africa Law Society, Oseko and Auma Advocates, the ALSF, Jackson 8. We want to talk about benefit sharing in the extractive sector. And our topic for today is the Kenyan journey so far. Our homegrown policy efforts and other efforts in light of the Petroleum Bill 2017 and the Mining Act 2016. And we are posing the question to our panelists, are we headed in the right direction? We are also trending on social media and getting questions from people who couldn't attend. So as comments and the conversation is going, a lot of it will also be on the social media, and we'll get questions to pose to our judges, to our panelists. We will also take questions from the audience at an appropriate time. So ladies and gentlemen, I'll be the moderator of this session. We've heard about benefit sharing. If you read a lot, you've heard about equitable benefit sharing, and that this is a must, okay? So in Kenya right now, we moved from the conversation a few years ago, what is benefit sharing? What are we sharing? What's that? To a term where we accept, yes, we must have benefit sharing, okay? And it doesn't matter who you speak to. It can be government, CSOs, the private sector. All stakeholders agree that we must share the resources that we have. So the question of why benefit sharing, I think Kenya is beyond that. I think it's no longer a question of why, and it doesn't even matter if you have the reasons or not. It's just accepted, yes, we must have benefit sharing. The question maybe a couple of years ago used to be, should benefits be shared at a national level so that all Kenyans can feel the benefits? Should it go to where the local communities are? Should we take into account issues of resource nationalism? Should we take into account issues of economic pragmatism? Should we prioritize local communities? Should we provide not just local communities, but poverty, communities that are mired in poverty, whether the resources or not are found there? And in both sectors, mining and petroleum, it appears that there's been a consensus around how benefits should be shared. So far, from policy, from conversations, from any practical mechanisms that have been offered, if you read what the CRA has put together, we sort of have an agreement that benefits should be shared between or among national government, county government, and communities, each within their own rights. So if there's agreement on this issue, ladies and gentlemen, why are we having such difficulty in deciding how the resources should be shared? We agree they should be shared. We even agree, the constituents, that those, national, county, and communities. Where we appear to be stuck, in my opinion, is how. Is it because of broken lines of communication? Is it because of paranoia? Is it because we live in a nanny state that we tell you how you should spend your money? Is it because of mistrust? Is it because of goodwill? Some of these questions we hope to discuss here, but perhaps you're also jumping ahead. Let's first conceptualize benefit sharing in the extractive sector. Everybody knows the extractive sector has got huge prospects when it comes to revitalizing an economy. And this tends to come with increased expectations. Doesn't matter. As long as you're a citizen of Kenya, you know there's oil, my gosh. Hey, life is going to be sweet. And if you're in those local communities, my friend, where's my limousine? I want it now. I want that now. But it also comes with so many issues. It comes with loss of land, livelihoods. It brings income inequality. It brings social disruption. It erodes the social cultural way, which some people feel that needs to have a price. It has negative environmental consequences. So there's a balance here. And when we talk about benefit sharing, another question that creeps up is who then shares the burden? Okay, so can we perhaps find a way to equalize? And what we love about natural resources is that God has a sense of humor, doesn't he? Have you noticed that everywhere there's natural resources has been a previously marginalized area? Fantastic sense of humor, as in just pop, he got us on that one. And so because of that, because most of these resources are found in poor parts of the country, then you found so many expectations among local communities that finally we've got something we can count on that's going to lift us up to be where the other parts of the country are or even above. The key challenge though, how do we ensure that such is fair and that there's equitable sharing of resources? Can the law provide any directions? Usually people turn to the law. What does the law say? What does the policy say? Who enacts these policies? Of course the government does. And then there's a lot of back and forth. When we look at our constitution, we've got two main provisions that we look at. Both, one is Article 69 that says the state has a duty to ensure there's equitable sharing of the benefits that rises from the exploitation of natural resources. The only thing that it doesn't say equitable means what? So that is left to the lawyers. You see why we brought the lawyers in front of you? And that's why we argue these things. Article 66, the state has to enact legislation that guarantees benefits to local communities and the economies from any investment in property. Those are clear. So once again, the direction to share benefits is clear. It's now in law. Now, following the Constitution in 2010, there's been a proliferation of legislation. We've got the Mining Act, which provides certain formulas. Energy Bill, different formulas. The Natural Resources Benefit Sharing Bill of 2014, a different formula. Petroleum Bill 2017, no one knows, but separate formulas. Ladies and gentlemen, the power of the Baraza is this. We bring them together. Then now we have got the easiest job. Huh? Let them figure out those tough questions. But more importantly, we want this, it's supposed to be a constructive dialogue. We can agree to disagree. We can agree to agree on certain points on benefit sharing and the like. And I'll start with Charles. Charles, we've had several conversations. Once again, Charles represents CSOs. And I know he's particularly passionate about thinking through this whole concept of benefit sharing. There are basically two approaches. There's monetary benefit sharing, and then there's non-monetary benefits. When you look at our legislative framework, Charles, are we backing up the wrong tree? Is our fascination with royalties in the mining sector and revenues in the petroleum sector making us blind to the contributions that the extractive sector in general can make? If you can share your thoughts.
Thank you. That's a very difficult question. Because first, I think the problem we have in Kenya is not basically only narrowed down into to the extractive sector. What we are seeing in this benefit sharing discussion is sort of the bigger issues, just as you discuss around marginalization and that kind of thing. So the benefit sharing conversation is actually, what we're really discussing is governance failures in terms of how have we not managed to bring the people at the periphery, especially the people in the northern frontier districts where a lot of the resources are found, into the mainstream. That if you look at all the stats, whether it's access to healthcare, access to education, all those things, we haven't managed to bring those people on board. And so this discussion around benefit sharing, stems from the bigger discussions, including around devolution and before that around Majimbo, in terms of how do we ensure that people on the periphery actually benefit from national resources. I'll give an example. I mean, I was born in Eldoret. Growing up, we got an international airport. I wouldn't say whether we needed it or not, but it was just sort of that proximity to power. I felt that when we wanted things we were able to get them from the area that I was from. When you go to the north, largely to the north, you see the lack of those, even the basic services, the basic healthcare, basic education. And that's why people talk, when people talk about benefit sharing, they say, okay, since we have this resource now, how do we try and keep it within us? And there's a Nigerian writer who has a good line around, you don't tell the people who are not eating whether the food has salt. And I think that's a basic premise now of the benefit sharing discussion.
Okay, that's a fantastic proverb. Very interesting observation. I wonder, Simon, just stemming up from what has been shared by Charles, do you know, as private sector, sometimes you always get the sentiment, everybody come to private sector to solve everything. And I wonder what's your take on what has been provided under the Mining Act in terms of benefit sharing, whether you feel there's enough of a balance. So the Mining Act, ladies and gentlemen, provides for several aspects of benefit sharing. One, it provides for a division of royalties 70-20-10, right? County, so national government 70%, 20% to county and 10% to local communities. And then it also provides that the companies must conclude community development agreements with communities, and there must be a percentage of revenues, I'm not entirely sure, of the company's revenues that goes towards these. So I'd like someone to just give his take from a private sector perspective on where you are right now in the policy space, and whether you feel there's an adequate balance, or whether you feel private sector to some extent bears a greater share of the burden.
Look, obviously, as you mentioned in your introduction, that the debate around benefit sharing is dead, okay? Benefits need to be shared. When it comes to the physical benefit sharing, so the royalty sharing, that's a function of government. That's got nothing to do, the company has no function in that benefit sharing process. We're legally obliged to pay a royalty every month to the national government. Okay, so we do that. What the government does with that royalty, how it shares it, what it spends it on, is not really a function for the private sector to be involved in, except to say the more of it that comes back to the local community and to the county, the better it is for us. Because we can turn around and say, you are sharing financially and this is how it's happening. So on the fiscal side of it within the Mining Act, the one disappointing thing for us is that the Mining Act was enacted in May 2016, I think it was. So we're coming up to the 2-year anniversary. The royalty sharing mechanism is not in place yet. Okay? Why? I mean, the royalty sharing provisions were put into the bill 2 years before it was enacted. Why wasn't government thinking about how that system would take place? So that's something that's frustrating for us, because we're still getting complaints that local communities and local government are getting no physical benefit from our mining operations, cash in their accounts to do their projects. The other side of it is, apart from, and again you mentioned as well, I actually haven't heard this bill spoken about for a long time, that natural resource revenue sharing bill, which originated in the Senate and didn't really get terribly far, I don't think, out of the Senate. That's the only piece of work I've seen that defined a structure of how the funds would come from the national government to the county and down to the community, as far as establishing different committees and proposals from the community level having to be approved at the county level, and for those county level plans to be approved by the national level before the funds flow down. I haven't seen that debate reignited after that bill. So we've got a system where if the national government gets the revenue royalty sharing process in place, how's it going to happen? What are the mechanics of it? Let alone how do we define community and the benefit and all that sort of stuff. So when it comes to the CDAs, again, look, BASE runs a big community development management program in consultation with its communities and the county government. And it should do, and we all should do, because they're natural resources, they're They're resources that belong to the people of Kenya, and there should be that flow back of benefit. The CDAs and the regulations, I think, constrict the structure of those programs a little bit too much. So in the case of BASE, look, even defining a minimum percentage of revenue, which is 1% in the Act, is problematic as well. Like, I get the idea that you want to ensure that enough's getting down, but you also set a bar. Why would anyone spend more than 1% if the Act says 1%, even if it does say a minimum? You know what I mean? So you could be robbing those communities in the county of additional funds. The other thing we have is that the community development agreement, the committees associated with them are very tightly defined, so they're going to be very neatly defined within your impacted communities. Okay? They're also quite structured, quite rigid in their structure, which means does the model for a community committee in Kwale meet the requirements of a community committee in Turkana or Northeastern? Okay, because the communities are structured very differently, and by putting it into legislation, you're not allowing the flexibility. And so the example with BASE, another example with BASE is that we obviously focus a lot of our community programs on our impacted communities, but we're also looking to do more. So our agricultural programs is actually looking to build new livelihood opportunities that extend well beyond those impacted communities. So will the Community Development Agreement committees allow us to spend money on communities that aren't directly impacted from other parts of the county? We get back to this topic of, for BASE, is BASE a Msambweni constituency project? Is it a Kwale project? Or is it a Kenya project? And the CDA seems to define it very clearly as very localised. So we're going to have to run two separate kind of community programs, you know what I mean? So we can focus on one and the other. Just quickly, and I'm sure we'll get back to this, I hope, later, but clearly benefit sharing is more than physical. There's so many other components when we think about benefit sharing. And the very short list I've got, and it's more than this, it's royalty sharing, it's revenue sharing, it's the CDAs or community programs, local content, which is a big one, and that's where government needs to partner a lot more with government than what it's actually doing at the moment. Employment is a huge part of benefit sharing, something we can talk about, and obviously skills transfer and training is another thing where the benefits from the project, having that expertise, are shared either locally or nationally.
So I'd want to give an opportunity to Korir and Majala in their capacity as national and county government. I'd like to clarify that Dr. Korir is also the head of law and policy at the Office of the Deputy President, in addition to being a senior legal advisor. I'd like you to respond to what private sector's investor has raised. I mean, he's raised quite a number of issues, including a supposed ceiling for communities. There's a lot more food for thought here that needs to be discussed, and I'd like to get your thoughts on what he's just said from the position of national government career. And perhaps as you're responding to that, you can also tell us, what are you all thinking about when we are putting this, not to focus the conversation only on royalties, right? But the question has been asked, what are the underlying principles? When we are thinking of benefit sharing, and like someone has said, there are various categories: local content, skills transfer, there's the establishment of funds, there's the CDAs, there's in-kind benefits, local procurement, and indirect social benefits. There's quite a bit. What are some of the principles that you guys think about, even as you respond to his questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. First, let me just say it's a privilege to be here and to just see the great work that is happening at Extractive School. Even though my colleague says that the debate around benefit sharing is more or less dead, but I think we're in a very unique place as a country, because in 2002, when I was litigating Enderoys, and Enderoys is a case relating to a different kind of natural resource. It's about tourism resources in a place called Lake Bogoria. When I was litigating that case on behalf of a local community before I joined government, You know, it was interesting that one of the issues or one of the orders or one of the prayers we were seeking was that this community should be allowed to benefit more, you know, vis-a-vis anybody else. And I remember in the judgment, the court ruling that the mere fact that a community is proximate to a natural resource, the fact that it's contiguous to a natural resource, does not in any way mean that they should benefit more than the rest of the country. You know? And so even though indeed the debate has moved this far, you know, it's really an incredible place to be. If in fact the debate is dead, the fact that normatively speaking, all the way from the constitutional order, there are very clear, unambiguous provisions regarding, you know, not only equitable sharing, but also that that equitable share must benefit the community that sort of suffers a disproportionate cost regarding a natural resource development program. You know, so I'd like to appreciate that, the fact that we are there. And that beyond the Constitution now, we've got at the minimum one statute that now not only embodies the principles, but actually provides frameworks in terms of how you can, you know, you can carry forward benefit sharing. I just want to respond by saying that when you look at the Mining Act, I think it's very clear in terms, of course, of ensuring that there is sufficient protection for the investor, that your mining right will not be expropriated, that your mining right will be secure so that you can invest the colossal amounts of money that you are investing. And so that's one piece of it, because even long before the government begins to draw benefit from this, you know, someone somewhere has invested huge outlays of resources, you know, as is the case with base. And so from the perspective of government, the understanding of benefit sharing, and I believe it's the perspective of the Mining Act as well, benefit sharing is much broader than the fiscal issues. It's beyond royalty. And the Act itself stipulates various provisions relating to local content in terms of capacity building, in terms of procurements, local procurements, and in terms of jobs and employment and infrastructural development. And the Act goes to an extent where, you know, the CDS basically is an institutionalization of the CSRs. You know, so that it's no longer a voluntary system that we have. It's institutionalized CSR that has clear benchmarks, you know, that are predicated on an agreement, you know, because CSRs initially were just voluntary, so it didn't really matter whether the community had agreed or not. But here is a case now where, by virtue of the CDS, already there is lengthy conversation with the community in terms of what their priorities are. And therefore, that benefit is actually meaningful. The law is also, the Mining Act and the Constitution embeds very important procedural laws that, again, we never had before. You know, the provisions around participation, the provisions around access to justice, so that in case there is a disagreement, you know, one can be able to still access courts. I mean, again, we take these things for granted, but from where I come, you know, having been in a space where you could hardly access courts, you know, if you were aggrieved in relation to a natural resource question, you know, these are huge, huge developments. Now, part of the delay in enacting regulations is also because of the constitutional requirements. The fact that the ministry, the government has to undertake very broad, comprehensive public participation in terms of, in terms of these regulations. When we enacted the legislation in 2016, we were just beginning to enter into a very complex political process which began to evolve in 2017. And so even in terms of the legislative calendar, you could clearly see that there's very little that came out of Parliament in the year 2017 because Parliament became sort of, abrogated, mid-2017, and most of its agenda really was focused on trying to address the political issues. And so there is a political challenge that I think was experienced in terms of addressing or facilitating the quick enactment of the regulations. I believe that over the next couple of months, we will be able to see the regulations in place. I think the same goes, for example, legislation regarding petroleum, oil and gas, where, in fact, whereas the legislation itself was formulated and adopted by Parliament and presented to the President for assent, there was a presidential memorandum, speaking specifically to the issue of benefit sharing and royalty. And in that memorandum, the President is not quibbling with the idea that there should be a share to the community. In fact, if you look closely at the memorandum, you would see that the President is saying that it's a question of absorptive capacity. Are there structures that will ensure that the community can absorb this huge investment that is coming to it? And so the proposition from the presidential memorandum is, let's peg this, this benefit to something, to a percentile. And so the proposal is, let the county get not more than twice its annual its annual revenue allocation, for example. So if Turkana is today getting 9 billion shillings in terms of annual revenue, it should not be able to get more than half, from oil and gas, related royalties. And the same thing goes to the community, where the pegging there should be not more than a quarter of what the county government gets in a specific fiscal year. So again, you can see that there are still quite a number of issues, a number of complex issues that require conversation. But I believe that Parliament over the next couple of months, will be looking fairly closely, around these issues. But clearly for me, from where we see as government, I think there's great commitment in terms of ensuring that benefits accrue to communities, but that vertical transfer of resources to communities is important, but horizontal distribution of those resources is much more fundamental, because it might be possible that the resources can come to the county level, but those resources may also become the subject matter of abuse. The same thing goes to communities. If communities are legal persons, how do we actually ensure that the most vulnerable within that community is also a participant in those revenues? So there is still quite a bit of conversation I wish to submit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Korir. Majala, I'd like to move on to you. I think you can pick on a few things there, knowing you, that you'd like to respond to. But one thing I'd like you to do is respond from the county government perspective. A lot of people feel county doesn't really have a role to play in the whole benefit sharing conversation. It's not really your providence. And we've spoken to different counties and the answer keeps on changing, or their feelings keeps on changing on this. But more importantly, there's a few issues here that have been raised about counties. For instance, the absorptive capacity, is that something that you feel has got merit? And the whole issue that under the Mining Act, it's so detailed to the extent that the investor feels constrained to only a particular geographical aspect, whereas it would have been better if it wasn't legislated, because then it will have allowed for more of a better impact. Your thoughts and comments, and any others that have been raised so far?
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure being here now in my new capacity as Deputy Governor. Previously, I've interacted with quite a number of you as a noisemaker, an advocate for the artisanal miners. Is this better? Yeah? Okay. So I've interacted a lot with a number of you in here as the noisemaker or the advocate for artisanal mining within the country. And generally, I find that my role within this kind of conversations is to localize it a bit more and get it to the local business. We're talking about benefit sharing, but the context of that is from a large-scale project perspective. Have we looked at what is happening from the either artisanal or small-scale mining perspective, and what benefits can accrue at that level? There are a number of things that I think I can respond to, but the first, on a light touch that I would want to respond to is base titanium. Simon was wondering whether base titanium can be considered Sambweni project or a Kwale project or a national project. I'd like to say I consider it a coastal project, mainly because base supports some of our community development agendas within Taita Taveta, of which we're very appreciative of. So I think you can either say coast or Kwale and Taita Taveta project. On the issue of should the communities that are contiguous with a resource, should they benefit more from that resource as compared to the rest of the communities within the country? I would want to be controversial here and say yes, they must. They're the ones who are impacted the most. They're the ones, especially when it comes to the extractives industry, are generally quite marginalized with poverty levels sometimes above 50,